Okay, let's bring in Justin Cotler, who is the founder of Underdog Athletics and the head coach and just a guy who's in charge of everything there. Justin, thanks so much for doing this, man. How you doing today?
Oh, good, man. It's a pleasure to be on with you guys. I feel like I've made it to the big time.
Oh, man. Well, that bar is pretty low, my friend. I just hate to put you in that. So you want to raise your expectations on that. But we wanted to bring you in because obviously the big news is that you have taken Ricky Gerard under your wing and want to talk a lot about that. But how did that whole thing materialize?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think it's funny is I was on a podcast and they asked me a question about who I might be interested in working with. If I had one athlete, and the funny thing is I had just come off a conversation with a friend of mine earlier in the day on that day when I was doing the podcast, and I had spoken about the fact that I would be interested in working with him because one, I feel like I could be a really good mentor and I could help him rewrite his story. And two, because I just feel like where I'm at in my life, the idea of it and the challenge of it was something that was very interesting to me. So when they asked me that question on the podcast, I said Ricky, and I know that it turns out that I guess he had been doing his research and had been thinking of reaching out to me. And it was kind of kismet, I guess, right? Like it was, he felt like it was written in the stars in a sense. And before I knew it, he had reached out and said, "Hey coach, listen, I obviously have watched you from afar. And I knew about you back in the DC Brawler days when you were coaching, because my brother played for San Francisco in the National Pro Grid League. And I was a big fan then of your passion and since then, obviously I know what you've done and what you're doing, with all of your athletes and obviously now with Underdogs out in Vegas. Would you have a conversation with me?" And that's essentially where it came from, because, I think at that point in time, he was, he came to me hat in hand, right? He came to me essentially like, I'm a pariah. No one wants to work with me, and for good reason at that point in time, right? Like, and I think one of the biggest things that we discussed at the beginning was, Ricky, I'm not going to do this unless you take ownership, unless we have an honest discussion about what happened. When you come back, I need to know that you are ready to show contrition. I need to know that you are ready to say, "Hey, I did it. I made a mistake. There wasn't one of these absurd reasons behind it that we've heard over the years." And he said, "I am." He said, I am ready. I'm ready to take responsibility. I'm also ready to come back and prove to people that this wasn't the reason why I made it on the podium. And I'm also ready to make my family proud and to make the people that I work with proud. And I feel like, I need someone who believes in me, and I want that someone to be you. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, to be honest with you. It was a series of months that we talked, and there were several discussions. I discussed it with my wife. I discussed it with my athletes. I felt like if this was something we were going to do, that it was only fair that I make sure that it was cool with the people that I love and the people that I respect the most. And I got to be honest with you, there were there was zero dissenting votes. It was 100%. Everyone was like, if he said this to you, he's willing to take responsibility. He's willing to do it the right way. He's going to listen to you 100%. Then it could be an incredible redemption story. It could be an amazing story, that he can essentially, rewrite, his legacy in a sense.
Yeah.
And he can't change, right? You can't change it. That what's happened up to this point. But what you can do now is you where it was going and where it can go can change. I didn't have anything to do with what happened before, and all I can help control, because at the end of the day, guys, it's his choice, right? Like, to do things the right way. All I can do is help guide, and ultimately my goal is to help him achieve his maximum potential clean and do it the right way. And let's roll, man. Let's see what we can do. Because I'll be honest with you, in this short period of time that I've had to work with him, woof, he's a talented kid. I mean, incredibly talented. His capacity is unbelievable. His ability to endure pain is unlike most people you're going to see. Mm-hmm. And I can tell that there's few things that he wants more than being able to prove that he can be spoken about as one of the best in the world and do it clean.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that it came about. And you know, I'm not naive to think that there's going to be a lot of people that question it. I'm not naive to think that there's going to be a lot of people that, you know, will say, why would you do this? You know, you've got you got a growing brand, a successful brand. You've got a bunch of athletes that you know, have done extremely well and are doing extremely well. You're bringing on more athletes. There's more people that want to work with you. But I got to tell you, and I, you know, I told Tommy this the other day on the phone, and it's, I say I'm not an incredibly religious person, but I am a spiritual person. And I like to say that I did a lot of reflection, and I really thought about it a lot. And in my gut, I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I felt like I could make a difference in this kid's life. And if I had said no, I know that I would have regretted it. And so that's really all I can go off of, right? I mean, I just went with my gut, and maybe it turns out to be a fucking terrible decision, but but I have this feeling that it's not going to. I really do. I had this discussion with Ricky the other day, and I had this discussion before he went on, you know, the podcast, and you know, if you've listened to the podcast, you know, he did own up to what he did, and he said he knew about it. And he said at the time he felt that, you know, he wasn't doing anything wrong, but now that he's had time to think about it, it's obvious that he was, you know, and that, but you know, the biggest thing for me was, I said, Ricky, listen, this is not about you anymore. Like, the minute that I said, hey, like, I'm going to coach you, and you're going to become part of Underdogs, like, you now are representing not just yourself, right? You're representing me. You're representing my wife, my kids, my family, my athletes. Like, this is now much bigger than you, dude. And he said, Coach, I know, I get it. And there's nothing in the world more that I want to do than make you proud. And when he said that to me, I believed him, you know, and so that's where we're at. You know, and so far I've been really encouraged by a lot of the positivity and positive responses that I've received over the last 2 days since the podcast came out, since we broke the news. You know, there are going to always be people that feel he shouldn't be competing, and you know what? They are entitled to their opinion, and there is nothing that I can do about it. And I've told him, you can't engage with them because they're entitled to their opinion. You know what I mean? Like, you, at the end of the day, dude, you screwed up, and they're entitled to hold that with them and hold that against you until the end of time. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing you could do about that. And all you can say is, hey, I respect your opinion, and I'm going to do things the best that I know how to do it and the right way now. And if I can change your mind, awesome. But if I can't, you're entitled to your opinion.
For sure.
So, you know, that's where we're at.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm sure there are a ton of people listening to this right now and are almost, I don't want to say shocked, because I think, you know, everything that you guys have going on at Underdogs especially in the last year has really started to snowball into something really good, and a ton of momentum, and all the performance of the athletes and the team and the camp you got going on. And a lot of people would look at that immediate and be like, why risk that? Right. Because like you said, it becomes bigger than just him. It's the reputation of everybody that's involved and associated with him as well. But it sounds to me like having someone that is essentially a persona non grata show up to your door, hat in hand, about coming back into the sport. it can't just be about being that as an athlete. And from what I've seen in terms of the development and the personal relationships developed within Underdogs, it seems like that developmental process extends beyond that. Did you feel some sort of, and maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's something else, some sort of responsibility beyond just Ricky the athlete in that instance? Do you think that was a deciding factor for you in ultimately saying yes?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, man, listen, I coach a lot of really good athletes. And whether I'm adding another good athlete or not, I mean, I hate to say that, but it's like, is that what I'm doing this for at this point in time? Like with him, I feel like I can help change his life, right? Like I feel like it's so much bigger than just the athlete side of things. I mean, maybe he never gets back on the podium, right? But what he can do is he can do what he loves to do, which is compete. If he can walk the right path, and now, say he's clean for the rest of his career, and there's somebody who went from literally having almost everything taken away from him and being for him, it's hitting bottom. I mean, to now being able to become a professional athlete again, to compete, to do what you love, to be able to be a role model for those who have made mistakes in the past and now who can come back and do things the right way. Yeah. There's an opportunity here for in my opinion, for him to change his life and for him to really create a phenomenal and positive narrative. And I felt like, and I feel like I can be a big part of that. And to me, that's bigger than just someone being a really good athlete. Like now you're talking about that transcends sport. Like it becomes bigger than that.
Yeah.
So for me, it had a lot more to do with that. And the fact that I felt like, listen, I'm sure that there are others that could have, he's just happened to come to me. Right. Like, I feel like from everything that we've been able to share over the last few months, I feel like we've now created a special bond. And I think that it's something that's going to grow. And I think that from that, you're going to see that he's going to do things the right way. Now, listen, Ricky's edgy. I mean, there's no question about that. He's a rugby guy. He's, to be honest, very, very introverted, very, very soft-spoken and shy when you talk to him one-on-one. But when the beast is let loose on the competition floor, he's a freaking animal, and you're gonna see that. And yeah. I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with, with him, letting that emotion, out when at the right times. Like I get that. Out on the floor, I'm fine with him being emotional, but at the same time, that doesn't go with, disrespecting his competitors, right? It doesn't go with behind the scenes or social media saying or doing things that disrespect or that show him in a negative light. Those are all things we've talked about and all things that we'll work on. But at the same time, like, I don't want him to get rid of that edge, because that's part of what makes him who he is on the competition floor. And I do think at the end of the day that, it's kind of cool to have characters like that. Not everybody can be squeaky clean. Not everybody can be the perfect, Yeah. And we need some of those too. But at the same time, like, Danielle's certainly not that, right? Like we look at Danielle, and Danielle's volatile and she's emotional and she's the opposite of Carrie and Bethany. And that's cool. That's her. That's what gets her going. And I'm not going to change that with her. And I'm excited to help Ricky be the best Ricky that he can be, right? Yeah. Not the best somebody else.
Yep. Anytime you're building trust, let alone reestablishing trust after it's been broken, there's a step-by-step process that needs to be adhered to. What are some of the steps and some of the things that you need to see Ricky do in order for you to get to the point where you fully trust him as a person?
Yeah. Well, the first and foremost for me was, I said, listen, you've got to get in front of the community and you've got to admit what you did. And you have to admit that you took it and that you knew at the time that it was illegal. That was a big step. So yesterday was a big step as far as admitting that, right? The second thing for me, and I think this is kind of one of those ongoing things, is, what I would love to see is when we get to a competition, the way that he acts, the way that he, portrays himself. I'm fine with being emotional, can't be disrespectful to your fellow competitors. And I don't think that he will be. I really don't. I think over the past couple of years, you saw one or two instances where you were probably catching him on, in a situation that probably, first of all, shouldn't have been recorded. And second of all, in a situation that I know in his mind was misconstrued as to what, vocabulary was used that's very different over there than it is over here. But at the same time, like, you got to know that, you know what I mean? You can't, to me, it's like you put something out, that's just not intelligent. Right? It's not smart to do. So I think there's just, there's ways of being a professional. And I think that for him now, he looks at this like, this is my job. I'm a professional, and I've got to act like a professional, and I've got to train like a professional, and I've got to be a professional. So that's one of the big things we talk about, right? Is acting and training and making sure at a competition that you're a professional athlete, dude. Like, there are certain things that you can get away with, and then certain things you can't get away with, right? So Sean, that's going to be something that I've got to see as we work together, and I think I'll be able to help along the way, and maybe there'll be some missteps, but I don't think that we're going to see any missteps when we talk about failing drug tests or worrying about that. He's passed one already. I'm sure there's going to be more in the future. If you listened yesterday, you'll know, like, he's pretty terrified of any supplements at this point in time. So he's not even, putting any of those in his body, So I think we're really, the way I look at it now, it's like, for me, bud, it's a clean slate, in the sense of, like, we're starting from here, right? Like, what you did up to this point, I didn't have any control over. And you've apologized to me. You've admitted it to me. So from here forward, like, yes, you've got a couple strikes against you in the sense that, you did what you did. But from here forward, we're with me, we're starting at zero, and now let's create the best. Like I said, let's create the best Ricky we can create.
Yeah. And, obviously with the Underdogs crew, it's not just about the individual too. You have the team there. I know you mentioned that you ran it by everyone, and you ran it by a lot of people, and you were given the green light. But I'm curious, was it as simple as saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about this," and everyone just saying, "Yep, sure, no questions asked"? Or
no?
I'm curious what the conversation, what were maybe the concerns? Because I think we assume what some other athletes' concerns might be, but I do think that you have a relationship with your athletes that could create that open dialogue. I've seen as much, so I'm curious what that was.
Yeah, more than anything, I let them know, like, hey, listen, this is what I'm thinking. Ricky had reached out to me, and I feel like this is, I'm seriously considering, but I want to get your input as to, hey, like, I can understand from their perspective, how is this going to reflect on me? Right. I'm associated with you. I'm associated with Underdogs. Am I going to catch some backlash for this? What are you doing to ensure that Ricky doesn't relapse or doesn't do anything to put us in a position that's going to possibly embarrass us, et cetera. Yeah. And so those conversations were had, and I said, this is step one, is admit. Step two is literally me saying to Ricky, like, we're going to do this 100% my way. Like, I'm not agreeing to it unless, unless we're doing it my way. And that, and when they knew that, I think, you know, at this point, you guys know me well enough and know my crew well enough to know, like, and my relationship with them, that like, they know what that means. And they respect that if I say that, they're okay. Like, I get it. And then I had a few that were like, listen, you know, we think you're the right guy to do this. Like, we think you're the right person. We think that, you know, he could thrive under you. And, you know, Con was somebody actually who I had a really long discussion with, Con Porter.
Yeah.
Because obviously Con knows Ricky really well. And coming from, you know, you know, coming from Australia and knowing Benny and you know, knowing Ricky as a young kid. And I respect Con's opinion immensely. And I had a couple conversations with Con prior to agreeing to do it. And Con was very supportive and, you know, really had positive things to say about Ricky, other than obviously what he had done, but just in his dealings with Ricky and knowing Ricky, and said, hey, he made a mistake, obviously, but I know the kid. And at his heart, I believe he's a good kid. And he said also, you know, coach, Justin, I think you could do an amazing job with him. I think he's incredibly talented, but I think that, you know, that he needs you, and what you guys could do together, you know, could be really important for his redemption and for his return. So, you know, those were the type of conversations, right? Like with Con and with some of my other athletes, and then obviously with some of the other people that I trust and hold dear in the sport.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that's, you know, it was not something that I took lightly. It still isn't. And I hope people understand that. But I feel at this point in time, I feel 100% good about my decision.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I didn't, and I had reservations and I had reservations, then I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel good about it. My wife feels good about it. Like my kids and the crew, they feel good about it. And, you know, Ricky has really, I think, gone out of his way over the last several months to ingratiate himself with, like I said, with Ashley, with my wife, and, you know, has been incredibly, I think, respectful and in a way, like, you know, gracious in the way that he's commented on things and sent me DMs and sent me messages about what happened with Carrie and Bethany, about how he felt crushed by it, being, you know, knowing that, you know, being part of the Underdogs crew and what it had meant to him to see those girls and what they did at West Coast Classic and all those things. But one of the things, Sean, and I forgot to mention too, about what was some of the prerequisites. One of them was to him, like, you know, because we started talking, you know, it's been maybe 4 or 5 months. And one of the prerequisites was, we're not going to talk about this until after the end of the season and until right before your reinstatement, because it's not fair to the other athletes that during the season to take any visibility and you know, and attention away from them, not just in my camp, but in any camp, like any of the athletes. You're not competing right now, and right now, until this becomes a story, which to me is, you know, a couple weeks before you come back, like, it's not fair for you to take any of the attention away, because these athletes have worked hard for it. So that's why, right, like, this is all kind of like, wow, this is happening. But obviously I've known it's going to happen for a while.
Yeah.
But that was one of the prerequisites, was, listen, man, like, we need to be respectful to not just the Underdogs athletes, but all of the athletes who have really earned the attention that they're getting throughout the season. So that was one of the big things, was just making sure, like, you know, you train, but right now we're keeping this undercover because it's not necessary. Like, it's not a story. It's not news. It's not fair to those athletes, you know, because, you know, why should any attention be taken away from them during the season?
Yeah.
Going back 4 years ago when this first happened, and it was sort of a meteor that had crashed into the CrossFit ecosystem. Someone on the podium had tested positive. What was your perception of Ricky Gerard 4 years ago?
I remember being at the 17 games and being so impressed with him and watching him. And he was really the only athlete that I saw that wasn't afraid of Matt and looked like he would go toe to toe and was willing to mix it up and was willing to talk shit and was willing to do the things that you need to do to beat a guy like Matt. I was really disappointed, actually, because I thought it was so good for the sport, because I was like, who's gonna beat this guy over the next couple of years, or even challenge him, right? And I felt like, wow, maybe we have somebody, who can do that. And I was really disappointed, and then, but to be honest with you, Sean, after that, I really didn't think much about it. I wasn't one of those who was so vehemently like, oh my God, he should be suspended for the rest of this. And no, listen, I'm a sports guy, and I have been my entire life since I was a little kid, okay? And played collegiate sports and have loved sports, and I'm a sports fanatic in every facet. And I love athletes, and I've loved athletes my whole life. Some of them have gotten popped, and some of them have, they've gotten suspended, and then they've come back, and they have been members of teams that I have loved. And I've always kind of, I've always been in the camp that, hey, if you got caught and you did your time and you came back, that you deserve to be able to compete and you deserve to be able to have a chance at your livelihood, right? Now, if you got popped a second time and a third time and a fourth time, right? You get to the point where somebody like a Josh Gordon, I just think at this point it's ridiculous, right? Like, in NFL football, it's like 6 or 7 times. Now, listen, obviously some of that is mental health, and I understand that. But if you're going to get, you're going to fail the substance abuse policy like 5-6 times, I think at that point it's crazy. But you've seen athletes that have done it once and come back and had incredibly successful careers. They did their time. They served their punishment. They came back and they did extremely well. And I've always felt like, okay, like I'm okay with that. And, not that it's right, but at the same time, like, you got punished, you did your time, you got punished. Listen, I've had family members in my life who, for all intents and purposes, we had given up on, they had been addicts, and they had been, sent to jail, and they had been, and after 15 years, miraculously, they got their shit together and they came back. And you know what? Like, I love them. They're part of my family. They're actually like functioning, incredibly interesting adults who give back to society and do things now that are really good. And so I think it's hard to put people in one box, right? I just find that to be hard. That's not me. So while I was disappointed, I also felt like, okay, you got punished, and now let's see what happens. Never really thinking that he was someone that I was going to work with, to be honest with you. It wasn't like I had a master plan. It wasn't 4 years ago that this was really recent, and it was something that, like I said, I just think it was kind of like the stars aligned at the time, and now it's something that came to fruition.
Man, that story resonates so well with me, because I have a similar story about a family member that I grew up with that went through that same process. And I think a lot of people right now, and I wrote a piece last week about the path to redemption. What does that look like as far as in the individual that has to answer that question, as far as whether to root for him, root against him, decide to work with him from a brand perspective. But there are some things that I think people would like to see from him as far as continuing to build that redemptive piece. And I think one of them, it was touched on yesterday in the interview, and that was his relationship with some of the other athletes that people feel he has wronged. do you feel like he owes Vellner an apology or needs to, in some way, shape, or form, start to repair those relationships?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'll be honest, he and I haven't discussed that. It's something that that I think there are apologies, and then there are apologies, and I say that in the sense that, like, there are apologies that are heartfelt that you really mean, and then there are apologies that are kind of like, well, fucking people think I should do this, so I'm gonna say I'm sorry, but the truth of the matter is I don't really mean it.
Yeah,
It's something that I'll discuss with him, and it's something that if he feels like, hey, you know, like in my heart, I probably should have done this. And if the only reason he's not doing it is because, well, you know, now it's so many years have gone by that at this point in time, Pat probably would just be like, oh, screw this guy. Well, that's not the reason not to do it, right? Because you don't give an apology because you expect that person to accept it. You give that because it's something that you feel you have to do and that you need to do for your own, right? Like for your own good. And so ultimately, that's something I think that I will discuss with him that I think is important. Whether or not he decides to do it, Tommy, I think it is really going to be up to him. And whether or not he feels like it's something that inside of him he feels is necessary. So I won't say one way or the other whether that's a mandatory thing, but I certainly don't see the harm in it. And whether or not any of those athletes accept the apology or whether it makes a difference, that certainly shouldn't be the reason why or why not he does or doesn't.
This is going to start out as a statement, but there's a question in here, I promise.
Sure.
I looked at Ricky Gerard in 2017 after he tested positive, and I said, well, clearly the talent is there because PEDs enhance what you already have. So he clearly has a good base level of talent. As an athlete, what are the things, you've touched on this a little bit, what are the things that you see from him that you think are going to make him a very successful competitor moving forward?
He can hurt as well as anyone I've ever seen. And I mean that in the best way possible. There are only like in the history of our sport, right? There are certain athletes that you looked at and you said, I don't understand how this athlete can hurt the way they hurt, because they're not great movers. They're not super strong, right? Like they shouldn't be able to do this stuff, right? And there's a place that he can go and live in that place for an extended period of time that only a few people in the world can do. I mean, that's it, right? And I can think of those people in my mind, but I don't want to compare, say that, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? And there's only a few people that I know that can do that, who essentially like it's 3, 2, 1, go, and all of a sudden it's just like they go to this place that I don't understand because I don't have it inside me. I have to be honest with you, right? And Ricky can do that. Like I said, I don't, he's not going to be the prettiest mover. He's not going to be the strongest. There are definite deficiencies that he has. But when it comes down to it, there are things that he can do as well or better than anybody else in the world that you have to be able to do to be one of the best in the world. And not everybody can say that. So I think that's his biggest attribute. Now, all those other things, moving better, right? Trying to get, absolute strength up, trying to be a little bit smarter training wise, where you don't just destroy yourself in the gym every single day. Right? He's got that rugby mentality, right? Where he'll run through a wall, which is not necessarily the best thing every day. Those are all things that's where I'm coming in, right? Like that's where I feel like I can help. because that other stuff, man, I'm going to tell you right now, I can't take credit for that. He's got that. Like, he's got that in spades. When it comes to just being able to embrace the suck and go to that place that few people can go to. He's got that. So all the other stuff is the stuff that I feel like I can really help him with.
Yeah,
for sure. Is there any more about Ricky? Because I want to start.
I do actually. The last one would be that he has, he's got a competition coming up. He's going to be back on the competition floor in Dubai. What are your goals for him for that appearance?
Honestly, man, I want him to go out there and I want him to have fun. Mm-hmm. Like, and I want that. There are probably some people that'll boo, and that's okay. And there'll probably some people that, but he hasn't been able to do what he loves to do for over 4 years. And I want him to be able to go out there and just take it in and soak it in and feel what it feels again to compete. I don't have, unbelievably lofty expectations in the sense that, like, he needs to go out and win. No, that's not. This is the beginning of the return. Like, you need to go out there and obviously I would love for us as coach athlete to be able to start to put some strategies into place, and for me to understand, I'll start to understand him better as an athlete. I'll get to see if he can execute X's and O's the way that I want him to, and stuff like that. But man, I really want him to go out there and, like, it's like, feel like a kid again. Like, get those juices flowing. Like, it's different being in his home, in his garage gym, especially in Australia right now where everything is locked down. Like, you're by yourself every single day. Like, let's go out there and feel what it feels like to be a competitor again. Like, the emotional side, the physical side, the spiritual side, all those things that you haven't been able to, because at the end of the day, there's no substitute for experience. So let's get out there and let's get some experience, because it's going to pay huge dividends down the line. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, well, he came in blah, 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 Dubai, and, this and that. That competition is not going to define who he is as an athlete. But what it's going to do is it's going to allow him to start to experience what it feels like to be an athlete again. And that, to me, is the most important thing with Dubai. And then, I normally would never say, okay, we're going to Dubai and then you're going to do Wodapalooza. Like, I would normally never allow an athlete to do that back to back. But the truth of the matter is, like, he's got to get as many competitions under his belt as he can, because he hasn't had them, right? He hasn't had that competition experience. And even before, when in 2017, he was basically brand new. I mean, he'd been competing, he had a couple competitions under his belt. That's it. So when it comes to competition experience, we need to get him as much as he can, without being stupid, as far as, just putting him in situations where he can hurt himself. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to try to get him as much competition experience as possible, and put him in the line of fire and go from there. But I think that's the biggest thing, man, is just get him in there and let's feel what it feels like to be an athlete again. I think I'm excited for him. I think it's great. I think it's, it's gotta be for him. I think just the jitters and emotionally, like, it's just going to be so good to be able to get on the competition floor and no matter what no matter what happens in that first event, it's just like, just be able to go out there and compete next to people that, you've been watching the last 4 years and dreaming about being on the floor again with.
Yeah. I've got one more question. He did mention in the interview yesterday that he's planning on coming to spend some time in Vegas, just to, acclimate and spend some time. For you at this stage, and for an athlete like Ricky, what is the benefit for you in getting to spend that time in person with him? What are some things you're hoping to work on, given his current status and where he's at, and what you're looking forward to in terms of accomplishing with him specifically?
Sure. Well, listen, I don't think that there's any question that getting him in the environment, he's used to training by himself, right? I think getting him here with these monsters that we have, again, I'll always say it, you're only as good as your training partners for the most part. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. But there's going to be no substitute for him being able to do his do Metcons with the savages that we have and do monostructural conditioning and go lift with Tola and go do this with Matt and go do this with Danielle and Bethany and so I think there's that. I also think it's really important for me to be able to. It's different to see videos and it's different to coach somebody remote, and being able to get eyes on someone and be able to give immediate feedback, right? Like that's huge. So having a couple months of being able to do that, I just think are going to be huge for him. And then listen, let's be honest, like he's been a pariah the last 4 years, right? Like just being able to socialize, being able to come and train with athletes and be around people who at this point like are accepting of you and are going to support you, and there's going to be a support system here for you, not just the athletes but with my family and this and that. Man, I think that's huge. I think it's huge for someone's psyche. It's huge for their growth. And he's still young. I mean, he's not 22 anymore, but he's 27 years old, and he's coming to me, like we've seen with a lot of guys, is kind of coming into his prime in a sense. I think it's going to be enormous to be in a really nurturing, supportive environment. I think it'll be invaluable. I think he'll be able to really come here and make some serious improvements. Because I'd like to get him here, like you said. I'd like to get him here for a couple of months. I think it would be fantastic.
I was just going to say that was the last Ricky question,
and
I wanted to shift over to just underdogs in general. We're long overdue to be catching up and about everything that's happened. But I mean, obviously, first things foremost, how would you describe your CrossFit Games experience from your perspective as a coach and everything that went down, just to kind of, I guess, kickstart that conversation?
2 words: holy shit. Oh man. Yeah. I look, it's hard to say. I still, it's like you still think about what happened, right? And on one hand, like how this season was just really building into this beautiful crescendo, and what we did at West Coast Classic, and how Carrie and Bethany were training going into the games, and man, just to have it, just to have what happened for them, I just feel crushed, like just not to be able to really have an end to their season, not for them to be able to go and really prove their fitness and prove to people, that what they had been doing over the last year and coming together in this environment, like, how much they had grown as athletes. Cause I really feel like the two of them were the fittest they've ever been in their lives. That was hard. It was really hard. And then on the other hand, to be able to experience what Danielle and I were able to experience together. I said this to her the other day, is she and I got to be able to experience something that no two coach and athlete have ever experienced together at a CrossFit Games. The stress levels of what she had to deal with, being tested a few times a day, being isolated from the group, having constantly being pushed and prodded by every single aspect of medical, of media, of this, of that. Like, no one's ever had to experience that. No one's ever had to deal with that. Me being there in a capacity that I never expected to have to be in, right? I was not a coach that week. I was the emotional support dog. I was anything that she needed me to be. The X's and O's got thrown out the window. We rarely talked about fitness all week, right? It was essentially like I was whatever she needed to be at that specific moment for her to be able to to get through the week without having, get through the week healthy, right? Yeah. Emotionally and mentally and physically. So for she and I feel like it was an incredible bonding experience. Like, it was amazing. I feel that much closer to her as an athlete. I was incredibly impressed with how she was able to handle herself. And she'd be the first to tell you with not necessarily being the most level-headed athlete, right? Very, very emotional, and for her to be able to get through it and in my opinion, do very well, right? I mean, she did very well. It wasn't necessarily what our goals were, but with everything that was thrown at her, I think she accounted for herself extremely well, and obviously had some performances that were among the most memorable at this games and in games history, right? So on the whole, man, it was such a mixed bag of things. It really was, because I while I was so devastated on the one hand, on the other, I wouldn't take back what Danielle and I got to experience together because of how much it vaulted us forward and propelled us forward as coach and athlete. There's a bond now that we have. I feel like that's just, I mean, it's indescribable. It's just so strong because of what we were able to experience together.
That is a great segue into the question that I wanted to ask. And adversity is a hell of a teacher. What did you learn as a coach? And what do you think your athletes learned that they will now carry over into this next season?
Yeah. Amazingly, I think as a coach, I learned a couple things. I think the first is just not taking anything for granted as far as like, I mean, shit, man, anything can happen, right? Like we saw that with like going in, I never, even 2 days before, right? Like even when, I have to be honest with you, and this is so stupid, but it's like, even when Bethany started to get symptoms, I was like, it's not COVID. Like, she's got a 24-hour flu. She's gonna be fine. Like we're going to be. And so, it really opens up your eyes to the fact that, like, man, you got to be prepared for anything at any time. And we especially in the world that we're living in right now, we've got to be incredibly diligent about making sure that we're doing everything we can do to put ourselves in the best position to succeed. And not that we didn't, but just all the things now in a COVID world, right? I mean, that's what I'll say. And another thing was, I think it just helped me become a better listener, a more compassionate coach, and somebody who loves data and who loves X's and O's. And that week was as far from that aspect of coaching as you could possibly get. And still the fact that, like, you could have an unbelievable effect on someone and not have it have a damn thing to do about actual X's and O's coaching, right? Which honestly kind of lends itself to my character anyway. I just feel like that emotional side of things, because I never look at this as a business relationship with these athletes. Like I never have, and while there are some coaches I think that can be incredibly successful doing that, that's just not me. And I've always kind of tapped into that emotional side. But I think it just helped me, explore that more and become, even better at relating on that level. But I will say this too, that it was, sorry guys, I think I'm getting a call and I'm going to decline it. It was huge in the sense that for Carrie and Bethany, coming off of that, like making sure that they had the time to emotionally recover before even even coming close to discussing what was next, right? Like just there, it was just a scenario where like there, I can't imagine what that must have been like for them, because I know how devastated I was, and then I'm assuming multiply it by 1,000, right, for them. So, just knowing that I was here for them in any capacity they needed, giving them the time that they needed away. And then when they came back saying, hey, listen, I'm here to support you. What do you want to do? Right? Like, I do understand that for you guys, like there was no end of the season. Right. So what do you want to do? Where do you want to compete? Do you want to compete? Like I can understand at this point, like anything you want to do. So that was big, just being able to kind of be able to step back and give them the time and the space that they needed. And now I feel like, man, we're all in a really good spot now. We're all in a really good place. Everybody's back, everybody's training, and I think everybody is really excited about what they have coming up for them. And I'm just trying to be as good a support system as I possibly can be for them.
Yeah. And that kind of touched into what my next question was going to be about, where things stand with the team right now. Are you guys back, preparing for the season, or at least some of these off-season comps? And I'm curious, what was the environment like getting back in the gym for the first time with some of those athletes? Because I feel like I don't want to use the term lightly, but you kind of have your world rocked a little bit in a way that is you don't see coming, and then you find a way to get back in the gym. And I think we take for granted how resilient some of these CrossFit athletes can be in terms of just like putting their head down and showing up and making the hard decision to choose, work every day to get to where they're at. But when something like that's so far out of like our traditional framework happens, I was just curious if it was a struggle for some of them, or were they just ready to go to get back in?
It was a struggle, I think. I'll be honest with you, like physically, Carrie and Bethany had, they took some time physically to recover from COVID, there were some symptoms that they had that they definitely continued to feel, even a month or so afterwards. So just being smart that way. But kind of just, it's her character in general. Carrie was the first one back, Carrie, it was funny is I kind of was like, hey, let's talk and let's do this. And I assumed, when we talked for the first time after, and it was a couple weeks after that she was going to be like, yeah, I'm good. I still need a little bit of time, whatever. And I spoke to her and she was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'll be ready to start on program on Monday. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And this is a couple weeks after, but that's Carrie, and that's her safe space. Like that's where she wants to be. So Carrie was the first one back in the gym, and then Bethany, and then Danielle, I think just needed some time emotionally to get away. She was also had a little bit of nagging injuries that she needed to get away, to kind of take some time. So she's back now fully, and so that's cool. And the boys are here, obviously, Tola and Matt are training. Tola's on a little bit different program than everybody else. He's on the I run every day and swim every day program. But he's lost 17 pounds.
Wow.
And he's looking unbelievable. Allie Scuds has moved here and she looks fantastic. And what a great addition her and her boyfriend Raph are to the crew.
Yep.
Alex Gazan is here. And, my goodness, guys, I got to tell you, there's another one coming up, the 20-year-old that is just blowing my mind. Like I didn't realize like she was going to be that good, and she's that good. It's just amazing, but everybody's kind of, we're figuring out where we want to go with the season. Carrie and Danielle will compete at Rogue. Tola, it looks like Tola, Danielle, Ricky will compete at Dubai. Bethany, I think, is going to hold off and wait and compete at Wadapalooza. So we've started, to kind of shift people and put them into some slots where they feel comfortable. No pressure at all. I want them to do what they want to do and feel good about it. It's tough. It's tough, right? Because, the in-season competition, right? We say in-season competitions. You talk about the Open, you talk about quarters, you talk about semis, you talk about the games. And then the out-of-season competitions, I mean, the purses are so good that it's hard to say, like, don't compete, I mean, shit, you want to be a professional athlete, you got to make money.
Yeah.
Right. So they go to compete. And I really hope that, and I've always said this, and, I've kind of, sometimes I take some flack for it, but like, we've got to figure out how to create some money-making opportunities in season. Well, I mean, we have to, we just have to, quarterfinals and semis, you gotta pay these athletes. Like, we have to figure out a way, because there has to be some downtime, because if there isn't some downtime, then we're not going to be able to see these athletes do what they do for a long period of time. The shelf life is going to be limited. And don't you want to see them do this for years and years? I mean, they're fucking amazing. The stuff they do is incredible. Like, I just want to see them be able to do it, but we have to be smart. So anyway, that's me on a soapbox for a second. But yeah, we'll do some of these off-season comps, and we'll make sure that we do it the right way, and we're not putting them in jeopardy. And that we're smart about it. And then we ramp up for the season. The great thing about the Open now is there's such little pressure on you. You could train right through the Open, which is beautiful. And honestly, through quarters. Truthfully. Yeah. And then, so really we're looking, your first real peak is semis, and then obviously again at the games. So that's kind of where we're at with everybody. Obviously you guys touched on it. I thought it was fun to listen to your take on Tommy Hackenbrook's.
That's great, because that was my next question.
So it's a funny story. I was wondering if I should keep it kind of like, nebulous or whatever. But yeah, no, it's funny is that, Tommy obviously is working with us, and he's taken on some athletes, and, is coaching some athletes, coaching Cheryl Mazzo now. And he's going to start working with more and more athletes. But Tommy, obviously we know Tommy's history, I mean, listen, he kicked our asses at Dynamics a couple of years. I said to Tommy, listen, I'm very seriously thinking about putting a team together, and maybe I should probably put some backstory to this too, because it's a funny story, and I know you guys will probably appreciate this. I know exactly the moment that I was like, we're putting a team in the games, and it was this year. I don't remember the name of the event, but it was the event where there was wall climbs, thrusters, and there was a team that was beating Mayhem, and they fucking let Mayhem come from behind.
Milford,
and it was
Pro One Montreal, wasn't it? That had the lead.
Pro One Montreal.
This year. This year. Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking.
It was this year, and they stuck to their 3-2-2, and Mayhem came up and passed them all 7. And all kudos to Mayhem. Mayhem's incredible, right? Like, but I watched it like 5 or 6 times, and I was at the games and I was watching it. It's funny. You talked to, I was in the same house. We were in the house with a bunch of people. And I remember I was watching it with Christian Harris, who obviously his team, what happened with his team. And but I was going crazy. And I was, it just drove me nuts. And I was like, listen, it's one thing to someone's just we got to have somebody who can push this team. Like, come on, man. It's driving me freaking. So anyway, at that moment in time, I was like, all right, we're putting a team in. So I told Tommy about it, and I was like, "Hey, Tommy, I would love for you to work with me on this. And by work with me, I would love for you to coach it." And so like literally Tommy immediately put out that social media like that was his post, right? So at that moment in time, like we were talking about, the possibility of putting a team together. So listen, whether or not it happens, I don't know, but I would love to. I would love to put a team together. We obviously have some athletes here that if they decided to go team would be fantastic. There's a possibility we might have more that comes, so that would be great as well. But in all honesty, I won't do it unless we can put somebody together who I feel will be competitive. And when I say competitive, does that mean that I think we can put a team together that can beat Mayhem? I don't know. Listen, let's be honest. What they've done is unprecedented in the sport. Rich could still be the best individual athlete in the sport, if we're really being honest. And those girls are savages. Yeah. So, I don't know that anybody's going to beat them, but I at least want to put something together that can push them, that can make them sweat. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't want to see them win by 400 points. Like that's not like, I don't want to see that. Yeah. So, that's just the competitor in me that wants to see that. So I think there's a possibility that might happen. Right. And then, there's a lot of plans we have for Underdogs in general, like just growing the brand and more programs we're going to have and more coaches that we're going to bring on. And I think there's a lot of excitement that, a lot of things that I'm really excited about for this year.
Hopefully your own space too, right?
Please. Oh man, that's in the works. And man, oh man, that's been challenging. It's harder than I expected it to be. But again, it's a different world. We're in a different world now. And I get it. There's a lot of people who are concerned about what comes next and losing money and all that kind of stuff. So, I will say, I'm cautiously optimistic that's going to happen, this season. I think it will. I think, we've kind of located a spot and if all things go well, we're looking to create something that I think will be one of the premier facilities on the Western United States, essentially. So, that's what we're looking to do.
I was going to say, man, you go from a city in New York where I'm sure dealing with real estate isn't exactly easy. And you come out west, you get to Las Vegas, and then COVID happens and makes real estate not easy anymore, even in Vegas.
Oh man, because it's amazing. It's crazy. It's so different here in the sense that, my God, you see there's so much land. There's so much. There's this, there's that. But I think just with what happened with COVID and so many gyms going under and so many, there's just a lot of people that are really nervous about gyms, yeah. and I get it. I get it. And so, it all comes back to what I think that we would be able to bring is really unprecedented and unmatched, with Tommy and with Zach and myself and with the visibility of what's going on in the environment that we'd be able to create, I think would be something really special. But that's hard to explain to people that aren't necessarily in the space. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're running into. But hopefully, like I said, like you said, fingers crossed, things are definitely moving forward.
So, well, he answered the question I was going to ask. So, So thanks, Justin. Appreciate you doing my job for me and answering the team question. But we'll let you go because I know you're busy and you got some fatherly duties to tend to. But we really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Best of luck with Ricky. Best of luck with the rest of your crew, and we look forward to seeing the Underdogs team at the games in 2022.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.